Good afternoon, everyone. Ramadan Kareem, and welcome to the first session of the Ramadan Pioneer Series for this week by the Dubai Future Academy, part of Dubai Future Foundation. Today's panel is about innovation during uncertainty, and what bigger uncertainty do we have than COVID-19? The biggest curveball we've had for a while now, the biggest black swan we've seen as well since arguably the financial crisis. Before I jump on and introduce the panelists, the very interesting panelists that we have, I'll introduce the least interesting person on this panel, which is myself. My name is Gaith Rahman from Dubai Future Foundation, and I run programs with multinationals, government, and startups focused on business models and emerging technology within an ecosystem called Area 2071, through which I know some of the panelists here as ex-colleagues and ex-participants in some of our programs. I also run Regulations Lab, which is focusing on creating markets for emerging technologies within the UAE by hacking at existing regulations at a federal and local level. On to my more interesting colleagues, we're joined by Ms. Najla Al Midfa, CEO of Sharjah Entrepreneurship Center, Sheraa, which is a center running out of Sharjah that runs incubation and acceleration programs and has multiple successful program startups under its belt. Ms. Najla, thank you very much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you. We're also joined by a few founders and co-founders from from startups covering different sectors. I'll start with Salwa Katkhuda from Little Thinking Minds, which is a leading education technology company that creates advanced digital solutions and resources for school-aged children. Salwa, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. So nice to be here with everyone.
You want to wave your hand? Yeah, exactly. Just here, everyone's here. Correct. Now we have also Ruba and Nashash from 3D Innova, the only 3D printing platform in the region that provides 3D printing education, printers, and products. Ruba, thank you very much for joining us today as well.
Thank you for having me.
And from the e-commerce side, FMCG, specifically on the FMCG and retail side, we have Nader Amiri from Grocer, an app for all your orders from your groceries and stores around you. And I'm welcoming back a colleague of mine, Khadija Jabri from Referability, which is a public talent crowdsourcing platform that pays financial rewards to anyone for referring friends to great jobs. And the only other gentleman, on the call, Faisal Al Hammadi from Yacob, which is a digital platform that provides parents with healthier food choices for their children, and also helping parents understand the effects and impacts of those choices. Guys, thank you very much for being with us today this afternoon. It's a very interesting mix that we have today. We have Najla who's representing the ecosystem of entrepreneurship and innovation, and we have startups that are representing some of the leading work they're doing within their sectors. The way I want to run this panel today is quickly go through an overview of what some of the interesting stories and some of the key obstacles and challenges and opportunities that you all have witnessed within your companies and that you see in the sector since COVID has hit, and what are some of the interesting stories that we can come up with and some of the challenges that we can highlight and even some opportunities. I'll start with Najla, I'll start with yourself. So I just want to focus a bit on the macro picture of entrepreneurship and innovation and the impact that COVID-19 has had. Can you tell us a little bit more from the perspective of Sheraa, be it on the programs that you've had, be it on the assistance and the tools and the offerings that you provide your startups, but also the way that you operate Sheraa? How has that impacted you, and what are some of the trends that you've seen as well from global players in the same field?
Sure. First of all, Ramadan Kareem to everyone who's here, and it's also really lovely to see so many familiar faces. All the entrepreneurs on this panel are also members of the Sheraa family. So it's great to reconnect with you all, and hopefully we'll see you all in person in better times.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. And I think, Gaith, I was just thinking about one of the things that you were saying in the introduction, how this is a Black Swan event. And it's funny, nobody was talking about Black Swan events, and now I feel like this word has become part of our everyday life. And even if you think about the topic or the name of this panel, right? Innovation during uncertainty.
Yeah.
I think, again, we have focused on words like these are uncertain times and these are difficult times and these are, you know, unprecedented times. And like I said, we use them constantly. Every email you write is, I hope you're well during these, you know, unprecedented times. But I think it's really important that as an ecosystem, we balance that language out with the language of opportunity, of creativity and innovation. And which is why I was really happy to see the name of the panel, or the title of the panel that you had proposed. Because the reality is, and we say this all the time, and I know it's easier said than done, but with every crisis, there is opportunity. And we really need only look back to, you know, the most recent, the financial crisis, 2008 to 2010, and some of the most interesting and successful startups or companies now that we use, Netflix or Dropbox or Uber, were all born during that financial crisis. So I think it's important that we as an ecosystem remember that and keep the positive language going, while also obviously not belittling the situation. It is a pandemic at the end of the day. And there is no doubt that, you know, we've all been impacted. Nobody expected this, no matter how good you were with your scenario planning, nobody could have planned for this. So we need to, you know, we're working through this together. We need to be kind to ourselves. As Sheraa, we pretty much launched into action from day one. For us, day one was, I'd say, around mid-March, when we realized this was a lot bigger than we initially thought. So we launched basically a hashtag called SmallBizUAE. And we put out a bunch of resources for our entrepreneurs that they could kind of access remotely. One of them was obviously webinars, which have clearly become really popular now in general. So I think we're all webinared out, but webinars.
And COVID-19 out as well.
Yeah. So webinars, obviously, we continue to do that every Thursday, but then we've offered office hours to our startups with, you know, our team internally, as well as other experts in the ecosystem with different areas of expertise. So whether it's fundraising, whether it's crisis communication, whether it's marketing, whatever, you know, whatever help you needed in whatever domain. We also created a Slack channel, which now has over 200 members from the ecosystem, because I think one of the big things that you need in difficult times like these and situations like these is a sense of community. And it's easy to create that when you have a physical space. But virtually, it's a little bit more difficult. So we've created that Slack channel as well, where people can ask questions, share their concerns, share thoughts, and so on. But overall, you know, that's been our perspective on the situation, which is, yes, it is a difficult situation, but also that genuinely, and I don't say this as, you know, just a platitude, but I genuinely believe that, you know, some of the most important entrepreneurs, the conscious innovators, will come out of this, the ashes of this pandemic. So I'm actually really excited about the prospects. I think we're going to see some really interesting ideas. You know, I don't think things are going to slow down. I actually think things are going to pick up. Certainly for us at Sheraa, we haven't slowed down at all. One, because we've been providing support to our existing entrepreneurs, but two, because we're actually seeing a huge, you know, inflow of ideas and people who want to go ahead and build their startups. Especially, you know, the sad news is obviously people are losing jobs, and they're great talent. But again, you know, trying to draw a silver lining around that, you know, what do they say? Necessity is the mother of invention. And if you can't find a job, chances are you'll try and create something of your own that you can run. And that's what I think. So I think that's going to happen. I think there's no shortage of problems anymore. I think anyone who says, I can't think of an idea, that's no longer an excuse, because there are so many problems now that are exponentially, another word that we're using all the time, exponentially bigger than we could have imagined before. So I think the opportunities are there. The reality is, you know, existing entrepreneurs are facing some challenges. I don't want to deny that. I think we can go into some of the details of what those challenges are. They're not the same across the board. A startup that had fundraised, you know, just before the pandemic is probably in good shape. Some startups have actually seen a spike in demand, you know, because of the pandemic. I'm sure Nader can and speak to this. But other startups are struggling with things like, obviously, runway. So that's one of the things that cash management has been a big topic for us. And then obviously the other one is a collapse in demand in some sectors. So some startups have had to entirely pivot their business model. So I'll stop there. I won't go into detail. We can go into detail in future questions. But yeah, that's overall where the ecosystem is. Yes, a lot of challenges. Like I said, we can go to the details of those challenges. But on a broader level, I also see a lot of opportunities coming out of this.
Spot on. Agreed. I mean, we at the foundation as well. We deal with similar. We launch similar programs as well, and we've seen a bit of a pause, but then a massive surge of these programs. Just coming out and saying, look, it's happening. It's going to still happen for the next few months. Let's try to figure out a way around it, and just try to extract opportunities, like you exactly said. Thank you, Najla. That was very helpful. I'll just jump on to the fellow panelists as well. And I'll start with Salwa. And guys, I'll ask you a little bit more specific questions about how the COVID situation has impacted the way that the short term in terms of the operations, your HR structure, the way that you even pivoting, and some of the tough questions that you've had to ask yourselves and the companies, but also in terms of some of the failed experiments that you had to run just to test whether a new product or a new service or an existing one is still relevant for you. And I'll start with Salwa. What can you tell us about what the situation for you before and after COVID?
Hi, everyone. So just as a reminder, Little Thinking Minds, we're an edtech company that produces platforms to improve learning outcomes in the Arabic language. And our main bread and butter is selling our programs to schools. So we're very much a B2B program.
Yeah.
B2B program means the program was teacher driven also, which means that we were basing all our thinking on a classroom where there was a teacher and the teacher gives the lessons, and then he communicates with the students on our platform when they're home. They can read, do exercises, etc. So we were quite affected, I would say, by the COVID crisis. Schools closed, which meant our pipeline for revenue dried up all of a sudden for end of Q2, Q3. And then schools, although they know they need something, a resource online to use because that's the new normal, they don't know if they can commit because schools don't know what's going to happen with their revenue. So it's a trickle-down effect, kind of. So we've had to make some tough decisions in terms of how much runway do we have left, what kind of costs do we want to continue spending on without obviously having to let go of anyone. I mean, we've built a team over 4 years that has been extremely, it's our family, so we didn't want to let anyone go. And we've had to together decide, do we do salary cuts? Do we stop some services that are not essential? And we've had to make some very, very tough calls, I would say. But also, like Najla said, we've had to kind of think of, okay, with this new world, the classroom may never be the same again. Schools may never go back to normal or what we thought was normal. So what do we do now in terms of providing our products to parents who are now scrambling at home to find any resources to work on with their children? We believe very much that the flipped classroom model is what's going to start being the norm in the future, where students go through their own learning journeys and the teacher becomes the coach with much less contact. And in this case, we're going to have to, or we decided to bring the higher priority on our B2C products with a lot more adaptive learning. This was coming maybe at the beginning of next year, but now we change our priorities to bring this much closer and start working on the data that we have in order to do a more adaptive B2C app and a whole company strategy. Yep. So I would say there has been a lot going on, but opportunity as well as opportunity in uncertain times.
Definitely. So you make it sound so easy, but B2B to B2C pivot is not an easy one. And I'm just curious, how did you manage to, I mean, obviously you were kind of forced to do it since the massive the demand has shifted. So what was the transition like?
So it's not easy at all, and we're still not there yet. It's just a strategy on paper. But so we've had a lot of, it was in our pipeline to start we didn't pivot, we just want to add a new revenue stream.
Right.
So we've been using the same apps for B2B this whole time, but we started opening them up for B2C as doing experiments here and there, getting focus groups, getting parents to give us their opinion, teachers to give us their opinion. And and there's B2C is a whole different animal. I mean,
exactly.
You learn a lot from B2B, but B2C is even the kind of team members you need, the talent, the skill you need is very, very different.
Yeah.
So we actually, what I would say we did is we prioritized the hiring of the team that would bring B2C, that would move B2C forward. So a product manager for B2C, more digital marketeers, more consultants on that end. And we're still very much in the experimentation phase and in the quick learning phase. But we just brought it forward and started working on it now.
Yeah, thanks. So, I mean, that you raised some really important points. I mean, some companies have either had to completely pivot and shift, or like you said, just added another layer of services. Yeah. Thank you for that. Faisal, you come from a similar market where you have to also sell to schools as well. How's the market shifted for Yacob, and where do you see them? Have you had to make similar decisions? Salwa mentions a few experiments that they've had to do, impact on talent. What can you tell us about your journey from that?
Yeah, thank you, Gaith. So yes, my experience is quite similar to Salwa, in the sense that we're also B2B and work with schools. And therefore, we were heavily impacted by the school closures. Just while you're speaking, I was thinking back to what happened in the past couple of months. And I think for us, our companies that serve schools, we've had the key challenge is trying to anticipate when will schools start to open again. Because the first time that we heard about it was back in March, where countries said the schools will close down for a period of 2 weeks. So we said, okay, fine, 2 weeks. Let's make the most out of the situation and plan to be back, after 2 weeks. Yeah. And then we heard that it might be a bit longer, maybe till the end of the school year. 2 days ago, we saw something in the news that there's no guarantee that September schools will start. So the moving goalpost is a challenge. Yeah. And however, thinking about what opportunities may come out of this, we're currently thinking of what's going to be the new normal when it comes to schools and how they operate. That's why we have been following what's happening globally in terms of policies from certain organizations. It seems like they're thinking about what new processes or and frameworks that schools can use in order to adapt to this changing environment. And I think that will be an opportunity because it will mean that our business is no longer a nice to have, and it's going to be more of a need, because our solution will be able to help schools to make sure that canteens are safe, and that they have things like contactless payments and so forth. So it's nice for once to be like, we're not a need, something that's nice to have.
A luxury, but a need, yeah.
Feels good.
Yeah. Fantastic. Faisal, thanks for that. Khadija, I'll jump onto something close to the education sector, which is, which is the next level, which is where referability lies. Tell us a little bit more about the challenges that you face and some of the opportunities that you saw. Were there any pivots? Were there any? I'm sure there were difficult decisions that had to be made or different questions that had to be asked. What can you tell us about it?
So in the case of referability, like Gaith mentioned earlier, we're a public talent crowdsourcing platform that pays the public for referring their friends to great jobs. And one of the biggest challenges with that is that there aren't any jobs being advertised at this point in time, right?
Yeah.
Which makes it a challenge for us or companies for us, right? However, the great thing about referability is that we don't run like a traditional recruitment agency, okay? If you look at traditional recruitment agencies, they have a lot of overheads, they have a lot of staff. Our business model always operated with freelancers and people working remotely. We have team members who are sitting in Portugal. Some of them are sitting in India. We have people who are in Germany. So we have people, and in the UAE, obviously. So we've always worked remotely. So our overhead costs, alhamdulillah, we haven't been highly affected from a financial standpoint, I would say. It's just that the money is not coming in at this point. But it's actually, I want to go back to what Najla was saying, where, you know, we could focus on the challenges, but we can also focus on the opportunities on the rise. And in our case, what's going to end up happening is that the recruitment industry is never going to be the same after COVID-19. This is a reality, right? And more organizations are going to look for unconventional, innovative ways to hire people, right? What we have with Referability as it stands right now as a business model is that we are offering an innovative approach to things. We actually were very challenged pre-COVID-19 to actually convince organizations to taking us on because we were unconventional. Now it will come to a point where people will need to look at candidates who can work remotely. Eventually, people are going to look for candidates who can look at non-traditional job descriptions, right? So you're going to end up in a situation where you're going to look at a new need for talent, right? So there's going to be a new wave of talent that's going to be required. And I would say in the very near future, when that happens, I think even if people go back to work, they will be re-looking at their options of online approaches of finding people, finding good talent, right? Having said this as well, you know, I think what's happening right now is it's putting a lot of things that already existed in terms of the digital world into acceleration. Like if you look at, for example, things like remote work or remote learning, for example, in schools, this is something that has existed for many, many years and decades, right? But what's ended up happening is that it's forcing the world to look at the infrastructure of these platforms and say, you know what, it's probably not up to par. We need to be on the hunt for innovative startups or innovative experts who can actually help us build the new wave of the economy. And this is when they're going to start coming back to us as startups. So I would say as startups, we're actually in a good place compared to probably bigger organizations.
Yeah, no, you raise a really good point, which is the unconventional before COVID has become a necessity. It become something that needs to be something conventional, which is an excellent point. And I think most of the startups that we've been dealing with have had very similar realizations as well, or at least the buyers of those solutions from the government or multinational side have realized that as well, and they saw that this is a great opportunity. And this is actually a good segue towards Nader, which is an entirely different beast on its own, which is the e-commerce sector, specifically in FMCG. I mean, Nader, what can we say? Like, you know, previously it was mostly about, you know, someone going to the supermarket and doing their own groceries, which was, you know, something that you wouldn't think about. But now that the unconventional thing of having massive e-commerce platforms backed up with sophisticated supply chain management has become the excessive need at the moment, to the point where there are some companies that are looking at drone deliveries at the moment, and they're pushing that agenda forward when it wasn't really something important. I mean, your sector has seen probably the biggest shift in demand. I mean, with that blessing comes massive challenges. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like you said, we've been one of the, let's say, more fortunate ones when it comes to business from the top line side. There was, I think, I don't know what's the right word for it, but surge is not the right word, because like surge is a, you know, some increase.
More like skyrocket, isn't it?
Yeah, something like that. So we're still trying to coin what is the right way to describe it. It was like till mid-March, I would say, in the first 2 weeks, like, okay, this is a nice growth. It's manageable. You know, we're well staffed. We have the right processes to manage this. But with every week, we found ourselves like, okay, it needs a bit more. It needs a bit more. So we've been always, for the last, I would say, 2 months, trying to build up our capacity, build up our capabilities, improve our processes. So for us, it's compressed like a full year plan into probably 1 to 2 months. So that was a main challenge that we had to come up with, saying, okay, we had the plan to do these things over this period of time.
Yeah.
How do we do it in 2 weeks rather than 4 months? The recruitment was a big challenge because we operate on a hybrid model. So recruitment from the point of view where things are in lockdown, it's not easy to find interview and train people and put them in the store because that part of our business model is also supporting our retail partners in the picking and delivery process. So there was a lot of uncertainty around that, but it's been great actually. It's been a great learning curve, a great experience to say, okay, we are scalable, but we probably had a lot more to learn. So it's really compressed everything. I think the thing that I've been most fortunate to have is the team that we've had. I think you see the value of the people because with this skyrocket in demand, then every one of us had to do the job of 4 or 5 people until we can onboard and bring on more people to the team. So the team really stepped up big time. We did have a lot of, obviously, with the huge skyrocket, a lot of issues that also came up. Some were let's say anticipated, many were not. A lot of new problems appeared, at the store level, at the logistics level, like you mentioned. So, how to find the right people, how to train them, how to deploy them in a way that is, productive. So it's been a lot of good problems to solve on our side.
Fantastic. And then just going back to the point about coping with the massive demand, how were you guys able to do it, and how are you seeing it in either competitors or some of the big retailers as well? What major shifts have you seen?
I think what we've seen, I think there were a few things that we've always been ready for, which was in terms of how fast we can move and make decisions. So that definitely helped us, versus some of the bigger players. We were able to, make some quick decisions in terms of hiring. So we actually 3 or 4 times the number of people we have in terms of logistics when it comes to picking and delivery. We were, lucky from that perspective that we were able to do these decisions quickly. Applying them was another challenge, but we were able to decide and move towards that. And because we had the data, we were able to advise our partners who were doing the picking and delivery themselves, saying, hey, this is here to stay, so you need to staff up. We were able to share resources. We were able to advise them on how to scale up faster. The logistics from the supermarket sides were a bit more challenging. While they did have as much stocks in their warehouses, I think no one expected this surge of demand. So replenishing the stocks was a main challenge. That's why the out of stock levels were high. Not that there was not stocks; the stocks were there, but it's how fast can you replenish was the main challenge. I think that's been trying to predict like what is the situation going to be. How much should we stock? Because again, in groceries, the margins are thin and stock management is really critical. So if you overstock, it becomes a big challenge. If you understock, it's a big problem. So finding that right balance has been a main challenge for us and our partners.
Thanks, Nader. Ruba, you've had enough time to think about your answer, but you come from a very different background as well, and your company operates in a different capacity as well. 3D printing. You guys provide the 3D libraries. You guys provide the education. There's an interesting offering there. Can you tell us how has that been impacted? Because I could imagine that a lot of it was virtual in the first place, but maybe your manufacturing side has been affected. But you tell us how's that impacted you?
Hi, Gaith. So basically, we're an all-rounded 3D printing company. So we do provide training, we provide 3D printing services, prototypes, as well as 3D printers. For the training part, we had a lot of camps and training programs prepared for 2020, which was supposed to be our big year, I think it was everyone's big year. And so at the beginning, when the schools shut down as a start, that means all the students and everyone's going to be home. So our spring camps were canceled. So I said, okay, so what can we do in this case since our camps are canceled? I saw one of my friends, her name is Tina. She has an events, an entertainment company. So she started renting out bouncing castles to families during spring vacation. So we said, okay, that's a nice idea. We'll do something similar, and we moved our spring program to the families, where we delivered 3D printers as well as 3D printing programs to their homes for a spring camp. So I found myself and our company adjusting quickly to whatever situation we found ourselves in. As for the 3D printing services that we had, most of them were put on hold for many reasons, for clients not able to pay for the products anymore, or they don't need it at this stage anymore. So we started researching what other countries are doing at this time, what other 3D printing companies in other countries are doing. And we saw a lot of 3D printed face shields being made, face masks, hands-free door openers that are reusable and not disposable, reusable products. So we said, okay, let's try out different things. So we started bringing in some different face shields products, and we tried and tested them out. We moved all our equipment and 3D printers to a location where they're accessible easily. And we managed to come up with a nice prototype and started promoting it. I had a close friend, she's a dentist as well. She was the first person to really support me as well to move things forward. So this is how we found ourselves shifting at this time. So we had issues, but then we managed to shift easy. Sorry, my daughter just walked in.
No webinar will be complete without these moments. Ruba, just to zero in on a story that you told me before when you and I were prepping for this. You mentioned that your husband was asking you about the face shields and why would anyone want to use the face shield? But you were saying that no, they're going to be a big thing and just you wait and see, and then it became a big thing. Can you tell us a little bit more about that as well? Because I think the audience would find it interesting as well.
Okay. Can you please repeat the question? I'm sorry.
No worries.
My daughter was talking at the same time.
No worries. So you told me a bit about the face shields that you were trying to 3D print as well, and how your husband said, "Why would we ever use them?" But then you saw that there was a massive use for them, and I think your friend the dentist saw a massive use. So I just wanted to highlight that as an example as well, so you can tell us a bit more about it.
Yeah. So I was just trying out different things, and he said, what are you doing? I said, I don't know. I just want to do something, you know. I want to make sure that I'm still in the game, you know. I want to make sure that I'm still there, alive, because this is the most important thing at this stage, is to keep yourself moving and staying alive in the situation, so that you don't find yourself in a place where you say, oh my God, my startup is over, this is over, I've worked so hard for it and now it's all gone. So I found that a perfect time to try things out. And now he said, okay, maybe this wasn't actually such a bad idea after all.
Yeah. Thank you, Ruba. Najla, going back to you, just we've heard now just from the different companies about how they've managed to fare and how their sectors are doing. But just given the macro view that you have at Sheraa and the unique position that you occupy, what other sectors can you tell us about, just from your interactions as well from other founders and entrepreneurs and startups? What other sectors have been impacted either negatively or positively, or some that have seen a massive dip, and some like Nader said, skyrocketed in terms of demand, in terms of operations as well. And going back to the conversation about the specific challenges and the opportunities, can you tell us a bit more about that as well?
Sure. Yeah, I think in terms of sectors, I mean, there really no surprises in terms of the sectors that have been impacted, right? So tourism, obviously, travel, hospitality, F&B, all of these sectors have, mobility. We recently obviously saw the Kareem, laying off about 30% of their workforce. I think, we're going to see a lot more of those companies face difficult times, and a lot of similar announcements to come, I think. So yeah, I think in terms of the industries that have been impacted, those are some of the key ones. But that said, I'm just thinking back to a survey. We did a survey with some of our entrepreneurs, and in general, the response was 70% of our respondents said that they had been negatively impacted. So I think really the majority of startups have been negatively impacted to some extent. And very few can say, and I think that potentially Nader is an exception here, that they've really seen a massive spike as a result of all this demand and have literally had to rework their processes just to meet that demand. In terms of startups that, or let's say sectors that will be relevant, that are relevant now and will continue to be relevant post-COVID, I think a lot of them, again, are here with us on the call. I think education technology is going to be a big one. I think employment is going to be a big one, and not just employment in terms of, helping graduates find employment, but also reskilling, because a lot of people who have their jobs will need to be reskilled, with these 21st century skills. So that will be a big one. I mean, we've seen obviously the importance of food security, localizing supply chains, that's a big one as well. So I think we're going to see a lot of interesting industries really benefit from the new normal, whatever that new normal looks like, But I think there are some lessons that we can take away. So coming back to the second part of the question, we covered, and I don't want to spend too much time on, what are the specific impacts. I think we know them, like I said, runway. I think, by the way, first and foremost, I think the biggest impact is just a personal impact. We're all going, it's a time of anxiety, it's a time of fear. So I think the first impact is just that human impact. At the end of the day, we forget this, but entrepreneurs are also human beings. This is a pandemic. And the first thing everybody's thinking about is, how do I keep myself and my family safe? So that's one part. On the business side, we've talked about, obviously, cash, basically runway. For those who have it, that's great, and they need to kind of try and extend that runway as long as possible. According to the survey that we did, I think about 65% of the startups were fundraising. I do think a lot of VCs continue to say that, oh, it's business as usual, but I don't think that's true. I think that the pool of capital available will be smaller, and I think it will primarily go to startups that have already received a round of investment, and startups that are clear winners that VCs want to double down on. So I think for those who are raising their first round, it might be a little bit more challenging, and that's where they need to start looking at bootstrapping or self-funding it in some way. So I think those are some of the challenges that we see. And then we talked about, obviously, the demand aspect, that there has been, the economy has all but halted, right? So obviously there's been a drop in demand in many sectors, and startups are pivoting to kind of either pivot their business models or find ways to survive this period. So I don't think we need to spend too much time on that, but I think it'll be interesting to see also what are some of the lessons that we can take into this new world going forward post-COVID. And for me, the biggest lesson as an ecosystem, and honestly, I think this has been the silver lining, is that we are no longer focused. And this is something I talked about, by the way, in November at the Sharjah Entrepreneurship Festival, where I said, as an ecosystem, we have the wrong KPIs. We're constantly asking about, how much have they raised and what are those valuations. We're talking about really throwing cash at the startups and saying, grow, grow, grow at any cost, chase a hockey stick, and, getting valuations to unsustainable levels. And clearly that bubble has now burst, and we're now back to fundamentals. So we can no longer afford to have unhealthy unit economics. We need to focus on fundamentals like retention and recurring revenue and paths to profitability. Nobody even talked about profitability over the past few years. So I think that's going to be something that will change, and I think that's really healthy for the ecosystem. And yes, that's another thing that we also asked in the survey about valuations. And I think, again, if I'm not mistaken, around 65% or a large majority actually said that their valuations had suffered as a result of COVID. So yeah, I think those are some of the changes that we'll see going forward. As a government entity, we've been trying to provide as much support as possible. We recently announced the $1 million Solidarity Fund, which is basically, it's $1 million of grants, and it's being split into 3 different offerings. One is financial relief, emergency grants for those startups that require it. These will probably be grants in the range of, let's say, $30,000 to $50,000. The details haven't been announced, so please don't quote me on that, but I assume it will be somewhere like that. The other is we really want to integrate, I think a healthy way to support startups is integrating them into supply chain. So if we can give them projects or buy some of their products and services or commission projects, either on behalf of Sheraa or on behalf of some of our partners, I think that would be really healthy. So we'll use part of the fund for that. And then the other part of the fund will be to support startups that are either directly addressing the pandemic. So much like Ruba said, maybe innovative personal protective equipment, or finding ways for rapid testing. There's a lot that's going to, obviously, the stem cell treatment that Abu Dhabi announced as well, I think is a great example of some of the innovations that can come out of R&D. And I think this is going to be the time now to start investing in R&D, because I think we've paid a lot of lip service to it, but we haven't done enough on the R&D front. So I think that we're going to see, a lot of government stepping up on their R&D. So the third part of that fund will be to support startups that are either addressing that pandemic or will be very relevant in the post-COVID world. So it could be any of the sectors that we talked about, like I said, education, food security, agri-tech, all the sectors that are going to become very relevant. Obviously, goes without saying, health tech. So yeah, as a government, obviously that's one, let's say a government entity, that's one of the forms of support, is the financial support, in addition to obviously trying to reduce their cost burden. So trying to bring fees down, trying to bring the cost of licensing down where possible, trying to bring rents down where possible. So there are financial ways that we can actually support these startups. But then the non-financial support is also really important. So whether it's by providing them a community like you have done in DFA and DFF, at Sheraa, these communities are really important. Having entrepreneur-friendly policies, especially when it comes to employment as we move towards the gig economy, as Khadija was talking about. When we talk about residency, these are going to be some of the entrepreneur-friendly policies we need to revisit. And I think another big one will need to be some form of deregulation, because if you want to bring some of these innovations to market, especially in sectors that are heavily regulated like fintech or telemedicine, of course, we need to be, careful and make sure that the processes are in place to protect the public, but we'll need to somehow cautiously also relax those processes to allow us to quickly assess and adopt those technologies. So these are some of the changes that I see happening in the, let's say, post-COVID world.
That's an excellent point, Najla, and thank you. You actually jumped on the next question I was going to ask you, which is where do you think the role of government should be, and where should it intervene beyond just stimulus packages or financial incentives and all that. So thank you for that. If I can just wrap up the question by just asking, how do you see the new normal for Sheraa? You talked about a few new realities that VCs need to be looking at, or the way that we fund, or the way that we assess companies. What are some of the new normals for both the entrepreneurship and innovation sector, but also specifically for Sheraa, given all the lessons learned?
I think as a whole, the new normal is actually going to be very good for the sector. I think one of the things that will happen is, I think entrepreneurship, it was on the cusp of kind of getting to the point where it was being taken seriously, but I still think there was a part of it that was still under the CSR marketing nice to have bucket. But I think now, governments are going to realize the importance of entrepreneurship when you're trying to build a resilient region. And so I think we're going to have a critical role to play going forward. I think especially and I think maybe it was Khadija or maybe it was Faisal who alluded to this, but this rapid adoption of new technologies, especially in traditional industries. I mean, who would have thought that overnight schools would just go online? This is something that in theory should have taken years, but it happened overnight. I think there's going to be
even working from home as well. That was another reality we had to deal with all of a sudden.
Exactly. So that's going to be definitely a new normal, where now that they've tried it, I think more and more corporates and more government entities are going to actually be open and curious and wanting to learn about how to engage with these innovations and how to engage with these startups. And I think that's a good segue into where do incubators and accelerators, let's say like Sheraa, focus over the next few years. And for us, we've all, I think as an ecosystem, always focused on the startup side of things, right? We need to do competitions for the startups and programs for the startups and so on, but we forgot that you also need to educate the overall ecosystem, the corporates and the government entities, on how to actually engage and work with these startups. And again, I know this is something that you do at the Dubai Future Accelerator, and I think that's something that's spot on, and I think we're going to see more of that. I think a lot of incubators will focus on their corporate innovation programs and corporate innovation offerings, where they can work with these entities and help them actually engage with these startups. So that's one thing. I think the days of having just a generic 2-month program that's, you know, just a bunch of workshops, you come in, you leave, I think those days are over. I think you have to have a very clear value proposition for those entrepreneurs, whether it's you have some certain technical expertise. I think a lot of the emerging technologies that maybe so far we've paid lip service to, AI, VR, blockchain, and so on, will suddenly become very much, it will come to life. So I think having expertise in certain technologies or in certain sectors will be important, or being able to actually help startups get to market in a very unique way. So I think these are some of the changes I predict will happen in the ecosystem as a whole, as well as Sheraa offerings.
Super interesting. And you've echoed what a lot of people are saying around COVID-19 being a catalyst for a lot of this change to happen. It's been something that instead of taking a lot of time to happen, it's been kind of forced on us to adopt. And now what do we do about it, whether we are in FMCG, whether we are in manufacturing or education or any of them. Thank you for that. Guys, just going back to the companies as well, and I'll start again with Salwa. Just building on the conversation we just had with Najla, what do you see as the new normal for your company, but also your sector?
So, I mean, like I touched on before, EdTech now is becoming a necessity. So you're going to have to be home. You're going to have to be educated.
Yeah.
It's not a luxury anymore. And something that I didn't talk about actually was working with less fortunate communities and government schools in big parts of the region where if they don't have access to a school, they don't have access to education. So we're working and partnering up with hardware providers where now there are big campaigns to get hardware to and internet, of course, to very remote areas with where a few houses can come together and access these resources. So this is something also that's been, a necessity, because a whole generation may lose its education if we just talk about the private schools in our region. Also, like I said, we're going to have to build everything based on the flipped classroom model without having a teacher. The student has to do a lot of work themselves, which means a lot more reliance on data and data mining, because you have a lot of data points, but how do you translate that into a journey for the students where they can self-learn and self-improve? Yeah. I would say that is very, very important moving forward. Yeah.
Okay. Khadija, how do you see the new normal for your sector? I mean, you mentioned a lot of changes that are happening now. It's not going to be the same. How do you envision the new changes going to be, or the new face of the sector, and where do you see your startup there?
I think if we look at the talent sector in its entirety, the way employers are going to be approaching the process of looking for talent is going to change, but also the kind of talent that they're going to be looking for is going to change. They are going to be looking for more relevant, people to join their organizations. They're going to be looking for people who are more adaptable, who can be thrown in any kind of situation and they will overcome, right? In our own organizations, I'm sure that we have challenges with our own staff.
Yeah.
I had a situation recently, for example, we have a 60-year-old in our team. This is not referability, it's my other job, but we have a 60-year-old in my team, and he has been working for the organization for over 20 years. And he doesn't know how to use things like Google Drive or Dropbox, and he is struggling, right? So we had to sit and train this person so that he can remain relevant. He's a part of the team, so we have to make sure that he's adapting, but he's struggling, right? So employers now are going to be a lot more cutthroat moving forward when it comes to looking for the right talent for their organizations who can be put into any of these situations. Because I really don't think, even post-COVID-19, I really don't think we're going to go completely working from the office anymore. People are going to look for blended approaches. Can we, you'll have staff working from home and you probably have staff working from the office. That's one thing. The other thing is the way that organizations look at startups. And this goes back to Najla's point. I'll be honest with you, like we used to struggle with getting specific type of organizations to even look at us because we were startups, right? Or paying us on time. This is now if we want the economy to come to a point where we recover it using startups, it goes back to the point what Najla was saying is laws are going to have to be looked at. Policies and regulations of organizations are going to have to be looked at, where we actually provide an encouraging environment for startups to actually work with organizations, right? When that does happen for my sector, they're going to look less and less at the traditional recruitment agencies. Recruitment agencies, they will charge a lot of money to finding talent. They're going to look for more cost-efficient ways, quicker ways, and ways that will guarantee them the kind of talent they're looking for. And I think that is the perfect environment for organizations or startups like Referability to thrive in. So honestly, we as a team, we're looking forward to post-COVID-19.
Fantastic. Khadija, you mentioned an interesting point, which is about the way that companies look at, or the way that the incumbents in the market, like government and multinationals, look at startups. Do you feel like this will open up a little bit more the field of M&A, mergers and acquisitions between startups? We've already seen some of that happen between startups themselves, but do you feel like this is going to be a bigger theme in maybe the rest of 2020 or maybe early 2021, where small startups will merge to leverage on value propositions, be it on the supply chain side or the offering, or even corporates buying or acquiring smaller companies to at a faster rate? Because we've seen that rate kind of pick up a little bit, but it would halt it. So where do you think is going to happen with that?
I think if I speak on behalf of Referability, I think it is very possible, because from our angle, we're just providing one end of the solution, which is finding talent. But you have another big problem that is arising, which is reskilling talent, right? So for us as an organization or as a startup, we would definitely probably want to explore that. We don't have the skill sets today as Referability to do that, right? To reskill talent. But if I want to offer an end-to-end value proposition to my clients, right, I need to look at other probably startups who do offer that option of reskilling talent, right? So I think more and more, especially when it comes to B2B startups, I think they're going to want to think about, merging with other startups or merging with other organizations that's actually going to provide that for their customers in order to survive.
Yeah, I completely agree. Thank you, Khadija. Faisal, new normals for Yacob, new normals for the education sector. Where do you see yourself?
Yeah, so currently we're planning towards a base case scenario, and that base case is that schools start to open in September. We anticipate 75% of the business volume that we had earlier this year. Having said that, we also anticipate there will be a different operating model for schools in terms of processes, like I mentioned. So we're now thinking of how to customize our platform to make it easier for schools to run new processes when it comes to social distancing at schools. Maybe there's a scenario that canteens are still closed, and schools will want, or parents will want to buy food online for their children, and that food can be picked up from 5-6 spots within the school. So that to us is the new normal from client perspective or location perspective. Second point we're thinking about is in terms of the customer channels. So currently we are reliant on schools, and if that channel shut down, then we're stuck. So we had to think about how to broaden our channels to the consumers, so that we become less impacted by such risks that we're going through right now. Lastly, in terms of fundraising, we have to think differently about it. I don't think we'd be able to keep speaking to VCs that would expect the high returns over a short period of time. We have to think about working with strategic investors or partners who can give us scale, and where there's a win-win and scenario. So that's how we're thinking about fundraising at this point of time. So yeah, we're actually quite excited to see what this new world will look like for us in schools, because we feel like with this disruption, there will be a chance for someone to come in and add value to problems that they're seeing.
Guys, thank you so much. Really, this is like probably you're the only bunch of people I talk to who are looking forward to post-COVID and to what it brings out. So thank you for that breath of fresh air. Nader, I'll ask you two questions. The same question I ask everybody else, but also because I think this question is relevant to you, given the massive changes that your sector is going through. So obviously, the new normal for your sector and for Grocer. And where do you see opportunities or more cases in the near future where there's going to be a lot of mergers and acquisitions from either some of the big players or some of the same players on the same level?
Absolutely. I think on the industry level, I think something that a lot of people are putting in the back of their minds now and not really focusing much on it is that groceries is a low margin business. Correct. That is facing higher challenges when it comes in terms of costs. Yeah. Replenishing the stocks faster on the shelves, getting them delivered to the customers faster, managing all of that supply chain, both getting the products to the store and then from the store to the customer, yeah, or going directly from the stores or warehouses to the customer. So there's a lot of change happening on the supply chain, which is adding more cost pressure. But because everyone is so busy trying to meet the demand, it's in the back of the minds of everyone. I think that's something that will emerge and will become a big problem for the entire industry if there's no actions start to take place, where technology obviously can play a big role. Yeah. This is something that affects the industry, but something that we're looking at as well. How can we play an added value role in making sure this industry's already margin challenged business becomes more sustainable for the long term? Another thing that we're seeing is that a very high level of competition. So this was a small industry that everyone said, yeah, 5 years down the line, I will look at. But, people who we were trying to convince to work with us for maybe months or years suddenly came and say, can I launch tomorrow? So a lot of people are now seeing this as a big opportunity as opposed to something that is a future opportunity. So this has created and will create even more higher competitive pressure, which leads me again to the third point, that more differentiation and innovation needs to happen. So you're going to start seeing, different kind of, and it's not just about, marketing or branding or, incremental things of how can I deliver faster? Okay, great. I mean, that's really a matter of capacity. You add more people, you optimize some processes, you add some technology, you can deliver more and you can deliver faster. But we don't believe that's what's going to give the competitive advantage. That is the baseline that needs to happen. It's really how has the customer habits changed? And how will it need to change? So if we think about social distancing and the things happening at the store, it's not really happening at the supermarkets. I'm sure all of you have seen that. Yeah. So we're saying, how can we as a grocer, how will the industry, how will the habit change? So how can we help people that want to go to the store spend less time at the store? How can we help our partners that operate these stores, help people and help customers spend less time at the stores? So that's a reality. That's a reality that is there today and will stay down the line. Of how to cut the time, how to tap into these kind of new behaviors that are emerging. So these are, I would say, three things that are very important for the sector that we're also looking at, and we're looking at from now. So that these were things that were in our, let me say, pipeline. In a year or two, we said, okay, these are the things that will emerge, but we're having to think about them and need to invest in them now. So that also leads us to start looking at, okay, if our pipeline was this and we needed to raise funds at X point in time, we're also looking at, okay, to enable all of this, to be able to do all of this, to stay relevant, to serve the new customer needs, we need to start doing that from now. So we're looking at, raising funds earlier. That's I would say, another reality that we're looking at.
Okay. And just on the second part, where do you see a lot of M&A opportunities within specifically your sector when it comes to small companies, either by the bigger players or some perhaps acquisitions on the same line as well with some of the startups?
I think it will come. It's something that has been brewing. I think this will accelerate it. I think everyone's trying to understand when is this going to end? How will it end? Can I do it myself? Do I have the capability? Can I, acquire or merge with someone to do that? So I think there's going to be still a period where people are still going to attempt or trying to figure all of these things out. It's a lot of decisions the big companies have been putting away. I think they will start assessing this in a more serious way now. So rather than us seeing it like the food delivery sector, where it took maybe 5 to 10 years to happen, I think here you're going to see it happen within a year or two. It's still going to take a bit of time, but it's going to happen sooner rather than later. Absolutely. Because end of the day, still, yes, while the market is huge, while there are different kind of needs to serve for the customer, I think everyone's trying to figure out what's the best way to do it, and okay, let things stabilize for a period of time and say, okay, this is how it will, we want to consolidate.
Yeah. I guess imagining what post-COVID scenarios and landscape, could be is the most difficult part, which guides you towards that in the first place. So yeah, you're absolutely spot on. Ruba, you mentioned that you looked at a lot of 3D printing companies or startups from abroad. What did you notice any trends? Did you notice anything that led to them talking about a new normal for the 3D manufacturing sector? Where are they pivoting, if they are? If there's a more push towards that, what have you seen from your learnings?
So I have noticed a lot of 3D printing companies found this a perfect time to try out and test different products, because there were a lot of companies and people that were available to see those products as something new that they can bring into the market. People suddenly have a lot of time as well to try different products. Because before that, speaking for myself, for example, I've had several products that I've been wanting to work on for a very long time, but I find myself busy in day-to-day activities and I never get a chance to do it. So I found this the perfect time to work on and develop new products in 3D printing. And this is one thing that I would appreciate for from now on is the time. I never knew that you actually have so much time during a day until COVID, and then how to use that time is really important.
Yeah, and where does that leave you as a founder of a 3D printed or 3D manufacturing company startup? Where does that leave you? Where do you see yourself in the sector, specifically here in the UAE?
So we're definitely going to focus on providing more online products and online e-learning and online products for B2C customers. And we're going to work on developing new products as well. But on the long run, especially for by the end of 2020, is to have a range of customized products as well, not to be so general, focus on what each person is looking for, especially in 3D printing. That's the best part about 3D printing, is that it's customized. So everyone can have their own thing.
Okay, Ruba, thank you. Guys, before I leave it open to go to the Q&A from the audience, I want to go back to Najla because the point that was raised by Khadija is an important one. And it goes back to the mergers and acquisitions within the startup ecosystem, which is seen, a few big deals, the known ones like Souq and Uber and Careem. But we're talking about other bigger corporates taking over the smaller players or leveraging them. We've seen it in the corporate world. It's massive. Where do you see that activity within the startup and entrepreneurship ecosystem? Do you think that COVID-19 is a catalyst for this? Are we going to see a few more deals? And does it make sense for them to do it?
Yeah, I mean, I think COVID-19 has been like the great accelerator for everything, and I'm sure it will be on that front as well. I mean, that's what I was referring to when I was saying that I think incubators are now going to have programs that are actually focused on these corporates. I mean, in more advanced markets like the US, big corporates have their own corporate venture capital funds and they invest in these startups and they work closely with them. But I think in the region, there has been support. The support has been there, but that integration, into supply chains, into startups hasn't really been there. And I think this is where, ecosystem needs to step up and help, because I think they're going to not just want to, I think traditional businesses are going to need to. Let's just face it, they're going to, it's one of those, you know, classic innovator die situations. And I think they're going to need as much help as possible. So I do see a lot more of it happening, you know, whether it's with corporates, whether it's, you know, family businesses, government entities. I think there's going to be a lot more engagement with startups. This is why I'm very gung-ho about the period to come, because I think entrepreneurship will no longer just be a nice to have. I really think it's going to become a core part of our socioeconomic growth. So yeah, I see it happening. I don't think it's going to happen tomorrow, but I think certainly over the course of the next year. I think right now, to be honest, a lot of these corporates are just purely in firefighting mode. So if I were to go to them and say, let me talk to you about innovation, it's probably not going to happen right now. But I think, let's say by September, once things slowly start to settle down and open up, I think those conversations are going to happen. And, you know, that's certainly one of the things that we plan to do as Sheraa, is start to engage our partners on that front.
Thank you, Najla. Guys, thank you so much for your insights. A lot of great stories, a lot of interesting pivots, a lot of interesting views about post-COVID. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I'll open it up for Q&A. Some of the questions are directed at some of the panelists. Others are a bit more open. So the ones that are directly towards you, I'll just name them out. The ones that are a bit more general, I'll just leave them out. And whoever wants to go for them, please go ahead. Okay, I'll start with Najla, there's a question for you. What are some of the areas that need the most innovation at the moment in terms of sectors? Healthcare, economic resilience, tourism, aviation. Where do you feel that innovation could play a massive role, especially now?
I mean, I think it's hard to pinpoint any one particular industry, because I genuinely think it's across the board. So yeah, obviously healthcare is the first one that comes to mind, just because of the situation and the nature of the situation. But I really genuinely think that every industry is going to have its own gaps, and there are going to be opportunities. I mean, when we talked about the Solidarity Fund, and we said that we're going to be focusing on some of the industries that are going to be relevant to the post-COVID world, we're talking about things like health and wellness. And when we talk about health, it's not just, let's say, you know, health tech, but
physical
it's
health,
and you know, mental health, that's going to be huge after this. I don't think we've even processed the psychological, you know, trauma that's associated with a situation like this. Then, you know, obviously supply chains, you know, Nader referred to supply chain, localizing supply chains. There's going to be opportunities there. Education across the board, not just the delivery of education, but as Khadija said, employment, reskilling, especially as we move towards working from home. I just think, you know, it's hard to say. Food security is going to be a big one. Abu Dhabi has obviously made some big investments now in vertical farms. So I think there are going to be opportunities really across the board.
Thank you, Najla. Guys, this is a question for all of you, and it's around how do you develop environments for your teams to be able to work remotely? I'm imagining a lot of them are already in the case of Khadija. But for the rest who've had physical teams that have, you know, we're sitting together for a large period of time, how have you been able to facilitate, you know, business continuity and resilience when they've had to work from home? Does anyone have I'm sure all of you have great examples of it, but, you know, go ahead, whoever wants to jump on this.
I think from our side, besides the in-store operation, let's call it the rest of our teams when it comes to, you know, customer service, operational management, catalog management, marketing, we've always operated as a remote team. So we have a big team. We've had around 20 people. Now we're around 40 people. Most of which have always been remote. We've always kind of had this flexibility. So you can work from anywhere as long as the work is done, and we would meet at the office only when it's needed. We've always had that in place. So we've, I guess, been fortunate enough to for the team to be able to communicate and manage all of this smoothly. So there was no interruption in terms of our processes of how we work. I think the last 2-3 years we've been doing this has given us enough practice to be able to, you know, move and communicate. I think that was very essential, communicating through all of this the way we have always been. Again, we've been lucky in doing that. We did face some challenges when it comes to on the ground in terms of, you know, interviewing, training, deploying people, which we're still trying to find ways how to do that better.
Yeah. Salwa, raise your hand. Go ahead. Sorry, you're on mute, Salwa. Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
Perfect.
now I'm good. So we, I mean, being a tech company, other than the sales teams, everybody can actually do their work remotely. And we've kind of also innovated the sales process into starting with webinars to get pipelines. So giving educational webinars for teachers on how to optimize the platform, preparing some kits for the teachers in order to get them to the webinar, and talking to them about our platform and other things that are going on in the industry. So that's also from a sales perspective how we changed our view of sales. But also I would say something very important is regular check-ins with the team. It's very easy for everybody to start going on their email and digging into what work they have in isolation. And for the first week or so, that's fine. But then when people feel isolated, they feel very demotivated. And the lack of belonging to one team is also, I mean, it's not good for the morale of the company. So we started doing regular meetings, regular check-ins that are on the calendar. Everybody attends. We take them very seriously because we realize that once you check in, even if you don't have a lot to say, it just keeps everybody at the same pace, on the same page, and still, I mean, working within the family of Little Thinking Minds.
Thank you. Khadija, you had a few questions that you saw that you wanted to answer. Please go ahead. If you can just repeat the questions and then go for it.
Sure. So there were questions around what kind of candidates are expected to increase the demand, and what jobs could vanish post-COVID-19, and what skills are required post-COVID-19. So I think, you know, all in all, it's kind of around the same thing. So I'll tell you what I think. I think to say what jobs would vanish at this point is a little too early, but I think what can be severely affected are jobs that cannot be reskilled, or jobs that cannot be automated, or jobs that cannot be supported through technology. So these are three main job areas that I think would severely need to be considered. But in terms of job skills that are required post-COVID-19, it would be people are expected to be more adaptable and flexible, more tech savvy, people who can be more creative and innovative, more data literacy, digital and coding skills. And I think one really important aspect is a new wave of leaders who can collaborate in a different manner and can collaborate even in remote situations. And I think a really, really important skill set that we're going to need goes back to what Najla was saying, is about the psychology of the trauma we've gone through. I think we're going to need people who are more emotionally intelligent in this coming period. And they have the ability to identify challenges within their teams from an emotional perspective, regardless of the uncertainty that we're moving in right now.
Thank you, Khadija. There's a question from Juma, and it's directed at Najla and Faisal, but I think it's relevant for everybody. As leaders and founders or co-founders, what are your key priorities in this time of uncertainty, especially when it comes to running your business or leading your business and managing through a lot of ambiguity, a lot of uncertainty? Faisal, do you want to take a stab at it? Yeah.
Yes, I'll start. So thank you for the question. So in terms of priorities, I think the key thing is your team is to make sure that that they're doing okay, and they're and motivate that they are and motivated and safe. That's really the key priority. So like Salwa has mentioned, it's very important, you know, for us to spend more time when we work remotely to talk about the personal side of people's lives as opposed to just the business. And that's something that I have observed when we've had the team sessions or team meetings, is that we spend more time talking about, you know, the personal aspect of our lives as opposed to business, which I think is important. Second crucial element for startups, it's funding, cash in the bank. So we're keeping a close eye on that to see how we can optimize it. And from our side, based on changes we've done in terms of pausing work on operations and marketing, we were able to restructure our funding to last a bit longer, and make sure that we have the time that we need to achieve the targets for our business.
I would agree with Faisal. Sorry, I started answering and realized I was mute halfway through.
No worries.
I was saying exactly the same. So number one priority right now, I think for everyone across the board should be the team and the people you work with. So making sure that they're both safe and that they feel sort of that they have a community that they can lean on. So for me, team is number one, and I'd say these are both equal. One is the team, and one is our customers. For us, our customers are our entrepreneurs. So making sure that we are there to support them, right? This is the time when we need to step up. We exist, our entire reason for existing is to support entrepreneurs, and this is when they need us most. So we need to step up and make sure that we can support them in any way we can. So these are the two things like that keep me up at night, the team and the entrepreneurs.
Najla, another one for you as well, specifically. I'll come back to you, Khadija. I'm getting questions around how certain companies can reach out. Some startups can reach out to Sheraa. What's the best way to do it right now? They have a few technology offerings. So just for the benefit of everybody, what would be the best way to do so?
So we have our website. So you can reach out through the website, Sheraa, SHERAA.AE, or on any of our social media channels at Sheraa Sharjah. And they're pretty active. So even if you leave a comment, there'll be someone there to respond as well.
Thank you, Najla. Khadija, you had a question you wanted to answer?
I wanted to go back to the question that you asked.
Please, yes.
The priorities. I think one of the things that I found working with the team is that you need to create a new normal for yourself and for your team in this period. I think when we're having conversations with our teams, it's like, oh, we'll do that when we go back, on site. We'll do that when we go back on site. I think we need to be comfortable with the fact that we're not going back on site anytime soon, And I think it's about...
Or the same way anymore, yeah.
Or the same way, right? And it makes us stop ourselves from reaching our full potential as a team because we know this is temporary. I think I need to think the way that we lead our teams, we need to remove that barrier of we're going back and just getting on with it and finding this new normacy and empowering our teams or our startups to think more innovatively in the way that we approach different challenges and finding better solutions, because it's only during the times of adversity, this is where the best solutions come out, So, this is the thing I try to carry on with my own team personally. And so far, we've yielded some pretty awesome results, alhamdulillah.
Fantastic. Guys, any other stories that you want to mention as from a leader's perspective? Okay. Don't worry, we have enough questions to go through. Another question from, actually we have one from Ben. How do organizations need to rethink HR and cybersecurity as functions during COVID-19? Anybody wants to jump on this? Khadija? You're the most relevant.
Can you ask the question again? Sorry.
Sure. How do organizations need to think HR? I think this is a bit more on your side. Cybersecurity, maybe if you have some insights on that, as functions in any organization during COVID-19.
I think one of the limitations that you have with HR departments is that they think in very conventional manners, or they operate in very conventional manners. If the guideline doesn't say this, I'm not going to do it. This is the way that it works with HR departments. But I think HR departments are now being put in a corner where they have to force themselves to think more innovatively. The other day, subhanAllah, I was having this conversation with somebody. He was a friend. He reached out to me and he said, Khadija, can you tell me a little more about referability? I have an organization that's looking to fill in a position. I was like, great, this is who we are. Just pass on our contact details. The next day, he came back to me and he's like, sorry, Khadija, they're not open to working with startups. okay, or with solutions for businesses, right? And I'm like, it's okay. And because at the end of the day, at the back of my mind, I'm like, I know at the end of the day, you're going to come back to startups like ours, given the situation of the economy, given the situation of how remote work is happening, you're going to come back to us, right? At some point. And I think it's that mind shift that needs to happen. It's really how people see HR or recruitment. It needs to change. I think that applies to a lot of B2B platforms, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, thank you so much. Before, just as closing remarks, we have His Excellency Khalfan Belhol, the CEO of Dubai Future Foundation. You just like to have a few words. Khalfan, Assalamu
alaikum. First of all, Gaith, thank you so much. Great moderation, صراحة, for a great group of panelists. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone that has joined us and the panelists. Hope you are all well and safe in those challenging times, and all your families are safe, inshallah. This is a topic that's extremely dear to me personally, and whenever I cannot have enough of it, I'd like to thank you all. I'll start with Najla. صراحة, Najla, I enjoyed the conversation with you, I think a few weeks back, or a few days back, I mean.
Days ago, yeah.
Yeah, time flies, but it was such a wonderful conversation, and it's amazing how you keep on coming up with different ideas and solutions, even though we've spoken about it recently, and I've also learned more today. So thank you for joining us, and to the rest of the panelists. I'm not going in any specific order, by the order I see on my screen. Lech Faisal, Lech Nader, Lech Salwa, Khadija, good to see you again. Lech Ruba, thank you so much for all the insights. I've been taking notes and enjoying them. I'm not here to ask any questions. I'm just here to thank you, and hopefully we can. We all understand that those are challenging moments, and we keep on saying that it's the most challenging for entrepreneurs. We keep on saying high burn rates and zero revenue, or at the same time, it's opportunity for other startups. But our turn as government, myself and Najla and other government entities are working continuously to find those solutions through different councils. So those kind of discussions are beyond the actual discussions. They develop thoughts and they develop agendas for us. So it's an amazing discussion. We've noted down comments, but feel free to continue those dialogues with us through the relationships that you've built with the Dubai Future Foundation or Sheraa and other government entities, because we understand the value of SME, and let alone IDEs and innovation-driven enterprises, which are the core pillar of the fourth industrial revolution and the economies of any countries that want to be in the forefront of innovation. So we get that, and we enjoy every conversation. And thank you for a lovely gathering, and I wish you all well and your families well, and inshallah we will catch up soon, inshallah.
And thank you for hosting us and for hosting these webinars over Ramadan. They've all been really interesting. You have some amazing guests lined up. I see Fadi speaking tomorrow as well.
Yes.
So looking forward to attending that as well.
Yes, please, all of you join us. And you know how Fadi is when he has the mic. It's always enjoyable. But feel free to join us. And thank you to everyone behind the scene. I see Asma, Jawahar, and Nader. Thanks for the gathering as well. Mashkourin.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you. I just want to thank you all, panelists. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Thank you for the insights and stories. I want to thank people behind the scenes as well. Asma, Jawahir, thank you everyone, Academy team, and thank you for the participants as well. This has been great, guys. I really hope to see you physically again, face to face, shake your hand, and all the best. Stay safe and stay sane, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you, Gaith.
Take care, guys.
Thank you.
Thank
you guys. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.